Hey everyone, and I know I do look tired, but try teaching the entire morning to a bunch of kids who are only interested in using ChatGPT to learn anything, and you'll look tired too. Anyway, in this week's episode, we've got finally the Rust on Linux debate being settled by Linus Torvalds and Greg Koa-Hartman. They both weighed in and said yes to the Linux kernel and Rust in a specific fashion. We also have a pretty dismal interview from the Fedora project lead, which shows that he either does not understand how Flathub works, or worse, he is misrepresenting it to try and defend Fedora Flatpaks, which would be pretty bad. We also have the release of the GNOME 48 beta, which does include the triple buffering patch, and a bunch of other stuff. I also want to point out that I'm running my usual kind of monthly poll, so if you want to participate and let me know how much or how little you customize your Linux graphical desktop or tiling window manager, click in the link for the Google form inside of the description. I know it's a Google form, but it's the only one I could find in a short time that let me do conditional forms. Let me know in the comments if you have other options. Just fill it in. We have 3,000 answers already, so the more we get, the more relevant this poll is. And we also have this message from our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Proton Pass. You know about Proton Mail and the entire suite of services that they offer. You've got mail, you've got contacts, you've got calendar, you've got VPN, you've got Drive, and you also got Proton Pass, which is their password manager. It is a secure, encrypted password manager where you only need one strong master password to access. And if you're like me and you have thousands of passwords everywhere and you're struggling to make different passwords and you can't remember them all, well, it's a godsend. You only need to remember one single strong password for the rest of your life. Proton Pass generates strong, unique passwords for all your accounts, and it auto-fills them in your web browser or on your mobile phone alongside other account information when needed, which means it saves you a lot of time with its built-in password generator. You can import existing passwords from browsers or other managers, you can track changes with item history, and you can organize accounts into categories using vaults. It is, of course, cross-device. You can install it on any web browser on your phone. I personally switch from Firefox integrated password manager to Proton Pass on an iPhone and onto Firefox on all of my Linux computers. It works perfectly. You have a link, as always, in the description to check out Proton Pass. Okay, so the Rust on Linux thing seems to be settled because Torvalds finally weighed in on the problem. He answered Christoph Helvig, the maintainer who started this entire conversation, and he said that maintainers can either take an active role with how Rust is handled in the areas of the kernel that maintainers oversee, or maintainers can just step aside and let people do what they need to do to let that Rust code access the subsystems that they maintain. He said clearly, kernel maintainers cannot object to Rust code in the kernel when that code just accesses and uses the C code that these maintainers oversee. They cannot block that Rust code from existing, and they cannot prevent it from accessing their area of the kernel. He basically said to Christoph that his arguments were garbage, and he said that if you as a maintainer feel that you control who or what can use your code, then you are wrong. And that last part was written in all caps. As Torvalds puts it, maintainers can refuse to have Rust code merged inside their area of the kernel. They absolutely can. But they cannot refuse to have Rust code interact with their code base. Maintainers that do not want to get involved with maintaining Rust code will lose all capability to say yes or no on whatever happens outside of the areas that they maintain. And Greg Koa-Hartman, virtually Linus's right-hand person on the kernel, came out with big support for Rust as well, further cementing that this is something that the leadership of the project actually wants. Specifically, Greg said that as someone who sees almost every vulnerability and bug on the kernel, most of those issues are problems that Rust would help avoid. Not as a silver bullet that magically avoids all the issues, but as a safety net that wouldn't let developers create code that has some of these basic security errors. He also says that Rust lets developers create APIs that can't really be used wrong, which is not the case with the current kernel APIs. I think that's a very good statement. It reinforces both areas of the kernel. It tells maintainers, if you don't want to learn Rust, you do not have to. But if you don't want to learn Rust and you don't want to have Rust code inside your project, then you will have to deal with Rust code accessing your project. You won't have to maintain it, but you also won't have any overview or any right to say anything about that Rust code existing outside of your purview. I think that's a good thing. I think that's well explained. I think that lets the Rust on Linux project move forward. There might still be some edge cases where you actually need to have Rust code inside of certain areas. For these ones, I guess it will be on a situation by situation basis, but right now, at least, what has been settled seems very clear for everyone. Now, you might remember the Fedora Flatpak situation, where Fedora is maintaining their own Flatpak remote, which has some arguably very badly packaged packages, creating issues specifically for OBS. Matthew Miller, the lead for the Fedora project, talked about this specific issue in an interview with Brody Robertson of YouTube fame. In this interview, though, it seems Matthew said a bunch of pretty weird stuff about Flathub that most people in the YouTube comments pointed out, but also it was pointed out by other more knowledgeable people, like, for example, Jordan Petridis, a GNOME app developer. He said, for example, that there isn't much of a review process for what gets uploaded onto Flathub and what doesn't, which is completely untrue, because there is a requirements page on Flathub, and those requirements are enforced. If you don't comply with them, you will not have your app visible and uploaded to Flathub. There are currently more than 100 submissions awaiting changes, meaning 100 apps that did not pass the requirements and review process and need to be changed to be uploaded. A developer even said that they find the requirements for Flathub more difficult than the ones to get added to the Fedora RPM repos. Matthew also seemingly misrepresented app verification, saying that the developer does that verification, which isn't true either. And he said that this doesn't mean the app was built with good practices, which, again, you have those Flathub requirements and guidelines to comply with, which are the guarantee that the packages are built with at least some modicum of quality. Matthew also makes the argument that you have to trust Flathub or even the app developers themselves when they use their own infrastructure to build the Flatpaks. And that argument doesn't hold, because it's the same thing for Fedora Flatpaks. You have to trust that the people making the packages in Fedora Flatpaks do a good job, and they clearly don't, at least not in every case, specifically for OBS. Basically, Matthew went in there and was supposed to explain the problems with Fedora Flatpaks and why the OBS package was as broken and what the policy of Fedora was on that, but instead he turned that into some kind of corpo speech / attack on Flathub, which is not at all what he should have done, and he either clearly doesn't understand what Flathub is and how it works, or he voluntarily misrepresented it to deflect, which is not a good look at all. In the end, at the end of this interview, a lot of people, myself included, we have lost a lot of respect for Fedora as a project, and that's not good. And almost as if it was in response to that interview, Cassidy James posted a nice long post on Flathub, its security model, and Flatpak as a whole. In there, he explained the permission system through portals, something that is common for all Flatpaks, the sandbox for Flatpak, the shared runtime system, as well as the human review, automated testing, and auditability processes that Flathub has. He also goes over verification of apps, what it means, how updates are handled, and a few special cases, notably the one where your Flatpak package downloads and installs another package with specific, very strict permissions. It is a very interesting read if you don't know much about Flatpaks and Flathub. It's not overly technical, but it really does explain things very well, and I'm pretty sure it's just a coincidence that this blog post was published a day after that horrendous interview from the Fedora lead. It's also probably just a coincidence that this post was vetted and reviewed by Jordan Petridis, the developer who wrote the write-up of the interview that you just read in the previous segment. Probably just a coincidence. This week, System76 also released the Alpha 6 for their Cosmic desktop. It comes with new accessibility settings. You've got a nice little icon in the system tray where you can toggle the screen reader, the magnifier, or the desktop zoom as well. Cosmic also brought what they call desktop view, which is basically just desktop icons, which you can toggle on or off. You can hide the desktop folder content as well as mounted drives and the trash folder. You can change the icon size, the grid spacing, and stuff like that as well. Cosmic also has some extra scaling options specifically for fractional scaling. You can now set the global scale, so 100, 125, 150 or 200%, but you've got an extra option to add 5, 10, 15 or 20% more scaling on top of that. The UI is not good at all. They should have just consolidated that into one single list, and if it's too many options to list, do a slider by increments of 5%, just like in KDE. The UI they settled on is just bad. Cosmic's launcher, which is basically their sort of macOS Spotlight equivalent or a KDE Krunner equivalent, now lets you display more than 8 results, which is good. You can now have more than that and scroll between those results, which is much better than the previous implementation. Cosmic Files, their file manager, now has file path completion. You can hit the down arrow when typing a file path in the search bar, and it will automatically finish the file path that you're searching for. And you can now compress and extract password-protected zip files. You can drag, select multiple items, and that will scroll the content window if you need it to. It's just a better experience. Copy-paste using the middle mouse button now works as well, which is awesome because it's one of the best features in any Linux desktop environment. And there are a bunch of other changes to the Cosmic Media Player, to the Cosmic Text Editor, to the default font, now replaced by Fira Sans as the default. And memory usage has been greatly reduced according to System76, including with minimized content, Cosmic Files, the Workspaces implementation, and the CPU usage has also been reduced regarding how desktop files are displayed on your desktop and how you use Workspaces. Plus, there are a slew of bug fixes. So as always, nice alpha, still not ready for day-to-day use in my opinion, but it's getting much closer to what someone might actually want to use. Hopefully the beta or the final release comes soon. The GNOME 48 beta was released this week with a lot of cool stuff in it, among which is triple buffering. You might remember that this is a patch that some Linux distros hard patch onto GNOME because it just helps so much with responsiveness and smoothness, especially on weaker integrated GPUs. This thing has been around for years now and was never merged upstream until now, which is really cool. There's also in GNOME 48 the screen time limits feature, so you can set notifications and view how much time you're spending on your computer. You also get the new Advaita fonts to replace Cantorel. You've got the image viewer gaining image editing capabilities, specifically cropping and rotating. Mutter has a new command line tool that lets you enable, among other things, the experimental HDR support. Nautilus has batch deletion of files that was made way faster. The USB portal is now supported throughout the desktop. You can now select the time zones for the start and end of events in GNOME Calendar. GNOME Music now supports high DPI album covers. The remote desktop app now uses VA API to accelerate the rendering of remote desktops using Vulkan with zero copy, so using less resources and with much better performance. And there are a lot more changes, notably with notification grouping and all the underlying libraries of the GNOME desktop. It's really good to see. It is really good to see that triple buffering support merge. It's what we call in France an arlésienne, meaning something that you've been chasing after and talking about again and again, but you never catch it. It never actually happens. It's really nice to finally see it merge. So many distros used it without any issues that it's cool to see GNOME finally putting that in its right place. Now, another month, another change at Mozilla in terms of leadership and direction. They now have a new leadership council, composed of executives from Mozilla Corporation, Mozilla.ai, the non-profit Mozilla Foundation, the for-profit subsidiary that runs Thunderbird called MZLA, and also Mozilla Ventures, their VC firm. Mitchell Baker will no longer be part of that board and isn't the CEO or anything. Also, they literally shortened Mozilla Foundation to MoFo in their statement, which made me laugh quite a bit. Mark Surman, the president of Mozilla Corp, stated that they had to diversify in the face of what he calls major headwinds in terms of financial growth and mission impact. He said that Firefox is still the core, but that they need to grow revenue and thus they will focus on open source AI and do online fundraising campaigns. He says the survival depends on strengthening Firefox and finding new sources of revenue. Yet another change, yet another nothing statement. They're saying the exact same thing every 3 to 6 months when they change leadership. Yes, we need more money to survive. Yes, we need to focus on Firefox, but we need to find ways to make more money and we still haven't. That's basically the exact same story every year, maybe even less than that. I really love Firefox. I like Mozilla's mission. And I will keep using Firefox for as long as it is the best browser for my needs, which it is right now. But seriously, Mozilla needs to get it together. Stop reorganizing all the time. Stop starting stuff and ditching it. Don't go into projects and areas where you know there's already way too much competition. AI is already overhyped. It's already a giant bubble. Don't go in there. You have no shot of succeeding in there. Start doing stuff that actually matters to your users. Please, we can't do this every year, Mozilla, please. Now let's move on to some gaming news. And first, Valve this week released the entire source code for Team Fortress 2, both the client and the server. They did it in an update to the Source 1 SDK, which has been open source for a while. This lets anyone and everyone build Team Fortress 2 mods, but also fork the entire game and make their own game out of it, on the condition that everything that you distribute is free of charge. The code update also includes 64-bit support, plus a bunch of fixes for various old multiplayer games based on the Source engine. Team Fortress 2 is not abandoned either, even though it is open sourced. Valve will keep it up as long as they can, I guess, although I would expect people to start building forks that will fix various issues, which will inevitably fragment the Team Fortress community. The SDK and Team Fortress 2's code are licensed under the Source 1 SDK license, which seems to have no restrictions apart from being free of charge and including the relevant license and copyright notice. That's really nice to see. I think I've seen the Team Fortress 2 community ask Valve to fix a bunch of problems in the game against cheating, but also for internal balance, and I guess maybe now someone can try and tackle those issues earlier than Valve by just building a specific fork of the game. I hope it sparked the same kind of creativity that I've seen back in the day when Bethesda opened Quake 3 source code, which meant a lot of games started popping off using that specific engine. That was really cool. Hopefully we can see the same thing with Team Fortress 2. Very cool, just like our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. You know about them by now. They are a maker of devices running Linux out of the box. Laptops, desktops, you name it, they have something for everyone. I only use their computers. I have one of their laptops, which is the Infinity Book Pro 16. I edit, record everything on that, and all my gaming needs are served by a Linux gaming console running Nobara, and that's one of their computers as well. It's the Tuxedo Cube. I review a lot of their products on the channel. They've been supporting me for more than 3 years. They're really good at what they do. So if you need a new computer, check them out using the link in the description below. Anyway, thank you all for watching the video. You know where all the usual YouTube buttons are, so you can click them to make sure that the algorithm respects Linux a little bit more. And don't forget that you have a link down in the description to fill out the Linux customization form, so I can make a nice informed video next week about all of this. So that's gonna be all. I guess you'll see me in the next one. Not next week. There won't be an episode next week. I'm getting my wisdom teeth removed and I won't be able to speak for like a week. But the week after that, I should be back online. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one in 2 weeks. Bye!